Okay, so it is now just before 10 a.m. As you can see, we did have 2 layers as mentioned earlier, but we got the roof torn off. We prepped the roof deck. In that process, we discovered that the attic fan was non-functional, so we just simply removed that. We'll be using a board to seal that in, and we found only 1 board compromised. Funny thing about that, you won't hear roofers mention this often because it's certainly not the right way to do things. The right way to do a roof replacement is to remove and fully tear off the existing roof so that you can examine the lumber underneath and make sure everything's intact before the new material goes on. But one thing roofers won't say often is when we do find that quarter cut, basically that the roof was never torn off, they just went and layered an additional layer of shingles right on top. Very seldomly are those roof decks in bad shape. You know, it's certainly not the correct way to remedy, your roof when you're doing a full replacement. But again, we usually find those roof decks intact. So it was good in the sense that we didn't have to change much lumber, a little bit more extra work with the additional layer to tear off. But as you can see, we've gotten through all of that. And one thing I want to point out to you guys hear me talking about this often. You can see at this point now that the drip edge has been installed. We have ice and water from the eave to 36 inches up and synthetic paper going up now as well. But one thing that I definitely wanted to point out to you folks, because you hear me talk about this often enough. If you've met with me, we've definitely had this conversation at your kitchen table or in your living room. So just to put an example with those discussions, this is what we mean when we're talking about the standard C3.5 prefab drip. So this is the smaller size. And this is the larger size, which is the standard prefab C4.5 drip. So as you hear me mention often on New Jersey homes where we have that extended gap, we come with the hope that, the standard 3.5 will fit. If not, we always are prepared with 4.5. And then one last measure, just in case either the C4.5 or 3.5, both are not fitting, then we simply just take a box of trim coil, which is exactly as it sounds. It's a coil of metal that they use for window capping, trim areas. It's just essentially thin metal that we'll put in this bender and cut and fabricate and bend to actually make standard, to actually make custom prefab drip that will fit any gap. And then one final thing just to mention was that we were installing certainteed ridge vent, and we have 1 box. They're 4-foot lengths, 10 to a box, but we have 40 feet of ridge space right here on the main. The issue with that, and I'll just take you around here, I can show you faster than I can try to explain without you having the visual. You see my ground crew here hard at work. I want you guys to take notice of this house as we walk around it. Again, remember, shingles aren't even starting to go on this roof, but you can see the condition of the home is pretty much put back to normal on the ground already. So you have this back room, right, that is attached to the yard. So picture summertime, you have children out here playing. I'm sure mom and dad spend a lot of time keeping an eye on what the kids are doing. So this ridge right here, we're going to cut out, and we're actually going to install the certainteed ridge vent there as well. And then one of the biggest pet peeves that I have is the garage area. One of the things I can't stand in the summer is that scramble to get in and out of the garage to the refrigerator for a colder bottle of water or something you couldn't store in the house in the fridge. And everybody's yelling about the garage door being open because it's deathly hot in there. So again, it's a lot of times a space that's overlooked, but we all know about that circumstance that I just described. So that being said, we are just essentially going to go and install some certainteed ridge vent over the garage area as well. And again, neither of those things were in the plans. This is what a good project manager should do on the day of the job. You try and plan and you try and prepare for as much as you can, but there are always going to be things that are going to require you to make a logical, rational decision on the day of the job. To have the roof off and to go to that extent, installing ventilation where there previously was not any, to do it on the main and leave those 2 spaces out just doesn't make sense. So we'll get that done, and yeah, we'll check back with you guys when we start getting shingles up on the roof and then eventually nailed down.